whatever I found a hole in the ground with cement walls.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I want one. I want one.
On our trip around the battlefields of Verdun today, we are going to look at huge craters and explosions. We're going to look at guns, big guns, and guns hiding in the forests still today. We're talking about secret underground hospitals hiding here as well. And of course, Roger's coming with me.
So we're
Right.
standing in front of what looks like a couple of mushrooms. Like
4 Chinese hats standing on top of chimneys. It's the troop shelter with the 4 chimneys for obvious reasons. It's built as a section of a railway tunnel with 2 sets of stairs leading down, one at each end, and the 4 ventilation shafts pointing skywards with the little rain protectors. They won't keep out a projectile, but they'll certainly keep out the rain from getting in. It was used as a first aid post during the battle at Verdun. And all the wounded down below suddenly one day were at the mercy of German assault troops who played flamethrowers on each of the entrances, so everyone thought they were going to burn to death. But at that moment, the garrison from the Ouvrage de Froidterre just up the road sortied and drove away the German troops. And so all the sick and wounded were saved. Yeah. Which is not like what happened in the Tavan tunnel, where they had hundreds of wounded stored next to ammunition, and then somebody dropped a cigarette and blew the whole lot up, and about 1,000 guys just burnt to death. Don't know whether it's built of reinforced concrete or not, because it's dug in the rock. It's a tunnel.
So it's a pre-war or?
Yeah, it was not long before 1914, I'd have thought. When they had the basic forts, they were refitting the interval forts, the ouvrage. They were putting in the concrete trench lines with the metal visors over the top of them, and so they would have brought in something like this as a troop shelter.
There's rock underneath us.
I suspect it's dug out of the rock, yeah.
I didn't know there was much rock in Verdun.
Oh,
I thought it was all.
You've never seen the citadel. That's just a solid slab of granite.
I'm taking you showing me that tomorrow.
I have no idea what that is. That wreckage there.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. What if there was a little structure here? I mean,
bunker. Perhaps it was the toilets. Toilet block.
I mean, it extends that way. It looks like it could have extended. I mean, it wouldn't have extended all the way to the.
No. But look, it's masonry, isn't it?
It's reinforced masonry. If you look at
the tunnel entrance, I mean.
I'm looking, but look at this. Yeah. This is reinforced concrete as well.
It's concrete. So what the hell was underneath that?
And look at the black. It had weatherproofing. It had tar.
Yeah, it's the roof of the toilet block, I think. The toilets would be exterior to the
this
medical
building, yeah.
center.
Reinforced toilet. I like that thought.
You don't want the Germans to put you off for what you're doing, do you?
Some things I don't want to be interrupted doing. Oh, this is deeper than I thought. This is cool.
Yeah, but you can't slide down the stairs, so be very careful.
So you'd have a little by the entrance. You know, this rock is the same stone as I've seen 19th century forts and buildings in.
Yeah, so this would be 1880s.
This could have been
construction. Could have been at the beginning. Older than. Yeah, okay, I better revise my. Yeah.
This doesn't look. This looks a lot older.
Well, better recoil a bit because there's a big block about to fall. The oil is going to come down.
Well, that one?
That one over there on the left. Look, there's nothing holding it up. Oh, why don't they
do stuff?
Yeah, fix this thing.
Well, because I guess not enough tourists have had it fall on their head yet.
Well, the kids come down here. They all want to run in.
Well, then nothing hit him one yet, I guess. Nobody got sued enough.
Oh.
Yes, this is wet and muddy and messy.
Yeah, very. Oops.
And dark.
Oops. Oh man, why is it all... I'm stepping on these blooming pine cones, that's the problem.
Yeah, that might
Yeah. Go for a roll on one of those.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not doing that. So you got red brick. This is just a big tunnel. Well, and when I say it's just a big tunnel,
Because this is the... I thought that was the entrance.
look at this.
But it carries on down, doesn't it?
This is the yellow brick with cement that's been covered up by the red brick. So did they build a tunnel inside?
Ah, no. The brick... Wait a minute. This would have been built in about 1890s because it's the same construction as the underground citadel when they bored into the granite rock.
Yeah.
And they have the rock face on the inside, but in this case they line it with stone. And then they have an internal shell so that the humidity never reaches the main part of the building. All right, it's been damaged and water seeping in places, but it's a kind of a waterproofing layer.
And the
Brick on the inside of the concrete or the rock.
and red brick was used forever. And here's metal door, which would... None of this was used for World War II. This was all World War I.
Yeah, all World War I, yeah. It's much bigger than I remember. I mean, I've been for years.
Yeah, and here you have the two vents for the air.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I would hate to be down here as a wounded soldier.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is still cold and damp, and we're in May. And here you see how the red brick has started to come down into a nice pile here. Do we know if this was... I mean, if this was hit in any which way...
Well...
I mean, this could have come down at the time. It could have come down any time, really. But a heavy explosion or shell outside here could have shook loose the masonry to some degree. Also, you see here, in here, I can see there's a little... This is more of a rubble in this wall. I could see a shell having fallen relatively close to this. At some point, there are cracks. There are cracks. Why am I standing under brick with cracks in it? Anyway, never mind. But yeah, there's cracks running through the red bricks.
Because the central portion is flat. It's like a giant keystone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, this is very similar to the underground citadel with a brick internal lining and then ventilation spaces every so often.
Yeah.
Why are these stones lying here? Where have they come from?
I don't know. Well,
Who's been smashing that up?
I don't know, that's one of the old bricks that somehow made it out here.
Really strange. Why are people breaking holes?
Oh, look at this.
Oh. Rodents.
Yeah, look at the crack. And once again, I'm standing under brick. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
All right, well, keep moving. And that's what...
Oh, what's that?
This looks like this would lead to the... No, it's not.
It's a drainage tunnel.
It doesn't lead to the house because the house is further to the right of me here. It wouldn't be an emergency exit, would it? I'm sorry to
Comes
do
out,
this sideways
comes out
for
in the
you.
hillside, doesn't it? A bit below. Yeah, you would need an emergency exit, wouldn't you, if there was fire in here or the entrances were blocked. But I wouldn't like to try to get out through that. Not with wounded men on stretchers, there's no chance they'd get them out.
No.
They are just going to burn and die.
Yeah, look at how the red brick is It's crumbling.
With the frost, probably, is it? It's cracking, isn't it?
It literally is cracking. But I mean, if there had been enough shell impacts around here, which there probably was, sooner or later you would think the masonry would start cracking and falling. Even if it didn't actually penetrate inside, if this was built into rock and you had enough impacts, heavy impacts outside, you know, it would slowly start to break, at least. That's why earthquake-proofing housing is all standing on rubber pillars, right?
Yeah.
This is brick on brick inside brick. It wasn't built to withstand the vibration of explosions outside. What is this? All part of the floor? You got nothing there.
Okay.
No, just wanted to light up path for you.
Thank you, yes. Wooden
This is wood, yeah.
beams across.
And they look like they've been sunken into the ground, not
But what is the construction of the end as well as
air intake.
Oh yeah, it's ventilation.
Oh, and here, look at this.
The chimney.
Yeah.
Ah.
And there's a vent for it too.
Right. This could be the staff quarters where they had their meals and.
There would have been a couple of bunker ovens in here to keep heated up.
Well, they did the toilet as well, wouldn't they? I mean, that's
Maybe.
basic things.
I mean, at least a bucket for the if it was wounded, they couldn't get out.
Yeah.
And if again you're in the middle of shelling and war going on outside, you couldn't really at this point go outside to go to the bathroom.
I know.
So they would have to have buckets in here,
Yeah.
and in the winter they would have to have bunker ovens or some sort of heating, little coal burning stoves or something. But I don't see any dividers that will divide this into sections.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
Very strange construction. Imagine the panic when they were playing flamethrowers on the exits.
But this one must have been built when they had time to really build and double walls and layered insulation, and and look at the masonry. This would have been.
That's identical to the interior of the citadel.
I was like, you don't build like this if you're under fire and you're needed, you're in a rush. They had time and money to do this, and this staircase looks so much better.
1890s.
Yeah. Oh, this staircase looks almost like new compared to what we're used to. And you can see that people have been running up and down these stairs. Some of them are.
They're very worn, aren't they?
They are very worn, yeah. But yeah, this masonry, this is all beautifully set up. I mean, this is shame it's crumbling. Well, look at the floor. Look at this.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, this is nice.
And what's on the right? What is that door leading to? Oh. It's a chimney, isn't it?
Isn't it?
No, there's no vent there.
Yeah.
How strange.
But I mean, here's something on the wall.
Yeah.
Radio, phone, desk, something.
Yes.
But yeah, this is 19th century masonry. And again, like the floor is just very nice. They really... And there was a window here. That was built.
Yeah.
That was bricked in.
Yeah.
And these...
Oh, sorry.
No.
I mean, that's normally the kind of stone you'd find on the exterior of a fortress.
Yeah.
With those, the bosses and things like that, the marks, not smooth.
Yeah.
There's no need for it to be like that.
I mean, this would have been where people then would check in. Oh, look at this. Look at this. This must be it. There must have been a little fireplace.
Yes, look at those bricks. Oh, that's beautiful.
I know. I mean, just for a little shelter. And I'm guessing the woods are full of these things here. Or things like this.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's that little thing again, full of winged beasts. And for hanging on the wall. And nice floor. I mean, this is heavy steel door would have been here.
This would have been a shelter, it would have been a guardhouse, wouldn't it?
It would have been. Not for close defense because there's no firing ports or anything.
No,
just
that's
more
true.
an office of who comes in and out of here. I guess.
Yeah.
Tag the wounded, something. If this was intended to be a hospital type position,
Converted to being one.
it was converted. Okay, so it had a different function.
Yeah. They just got so many wounded men, they didn't really know what to do. But look at the stones, yeah, that's exactly like the citadel.
Yeah.
Yeah, under the ivy, that's beautiful, beautiful workmanship. Ah, okay.
And if I were to look behind me, to my left, I'm guessing I'm standing with 1 foot in a crater. Yes, I started moving down. You gotta remember, there's shell craters everywhere, and there's another one. Oh, there's something smaller.
Yeah.
Oh, this is actually quite impressive for a little. Yeah, look, here's more craters. Wow. And
It was just a bit of a railway tunnel or something like that. Oh yeah, there's.
yeah, right.
And that's another one there, is it? Or a... Yeah, it's not a part of a trench system. I don't know.
They are somewhat symmetrical, except that one's bigger. But shells again. If it had been World War II, I would say vehicle shelter. And if it wasn't facing up a hill, I would say, well, you dig an artillery piece there, a howitzer here, but not there. I think that's just a hole. But here's another one.
Oh, that's there. That's a big hole, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Maybe. On the other side. Well, that may have been a natural. Whatever bunker. You don't get that here. You get plans of the forts.
So the French.
They don't worry about the shelters.
Did they at least map them out of where they were?
Yeah, they have a big map of where they are and the railway connections. Such a shame they haven't propped up the stonework down there.
Yeah.
Brickwork, really.
They really should do that and should do it quickly. Yeah, because all this is pockmarked as well. This whole area. Which is what Lenin. But it's interesting because here's like a square field with only a couple of trees in the middle of what has become a forest. Everywhere else there are woods. Yeah.
There are 3 farms to the east of Verdun. 3 years ago, the government closed them down because when the German army marched away after the 11th of November 1918, they took their cannons with them, but they left behind their stocks of gas shells. They were not going to drag those back home to Berlin to take part in parades. So the French army came along and said, oh, we've dismantled them. You do not dismantle gas shells, you do not touch them.
No.
They buried them.
Oh.
And 3 or 4 years ago, the thin cases, which are meant to crack open,
Yeah.
all rusted through, and all the cows started to get sick, and all the chickens started to die off. The French government closed down the 3 farms. I think they bought up the land like they did with the disappeared villages.
Yeah.
Those farms will be in the red zone.
Yeah.
And what on earth you do with them with thousands of gas shells leaking? It's a big, big ecological problem. So we're still suffering from World War I, well over 100 years after it ended.
Just like in the North Sea, they dumped in all the mustard gas shells that the fishermen still catch today.
Yes. And in the Baltic, where they're just off the beach, they were supposed to have taken them out into deep water, but they rushed the job and just dumped them off the bathing beaches.
Would it be possible to burn away
Yes,
shell gas?
you
I mean,
can
if
do
it
that.
burned, that would help. But of course,
You
Now
need
you're
very
burning
specialist-
explosives with gas in it.
Yes.
Yes, that also sounds like a bad idea.
It's going to be very expensive, and of course you've got to transport them, haven't you, to the disposal plant.
Yeah, you
That's
yeah.
not easy digging up a 100-year-old gas shell.
I've seen
Well, there are 1,000 of them.
I've seen disposal plants that would dispose of radiation and
Yeah.
and toxic, where you would literally encase it in plastic.
Ah.
But you know, a couple of 100 kilos of uranium and weird things you encase in plastic and store away is one thing. How many tons of gas shells did you say?
Oh, there are a couple of thousand gas shells.
Yeah, that's
That
yeah,
is a major problem.
it is.
There's a field where I pass every time I descend to Verdun. Our local journalist was in the car one day. He said, Roger, the farmer here is my friend. Nothing will grow in that little rectangle there. He's tried everything. There's a rectangle of bare earth in the middle of his field. All his crops are around, but there's a little stock of gas shells there which are leaking. And he doesn't dare declare it because this whole farm would be shut down by the government.
It's interesting because we're standing on this little mound, but the tunnel underneath is way lower. This is not the roof of the tunnel. That's 10, 15 meters below where we are.
Yeah.
Because the entrance is all the way down there, and that goes down the steps for about 5-7 meters. I don't know if they dug it into or they just filled it up.
They dug it in the side of the hill and covered it over.
All right, so we've come a little closer. Well, actually, we've gone a little further. All right, we drove around. We're not entirely sure where we are. And this is a position for one of the big heavy guns. This was originally built by the French and then captured by the Germans, who then used it. And a similar setup, really. You have trenches, you have rail access, of which here is a little bit left. Then there's big cannon pits, munition bunkers, and so on, that we have not yet found.
This is the little light railway. Now that's a section that 6 men could pick up and reposition overnight, and clip it together like your Bachmann or your and the little Peugeot double locos.
Could be. Could be. Yeah, because I think everything is to the right. Everything else except this is to the right of us, judging from the sign.
They brought us all the way over to see
A rail. Well, I mean,
This
it's...
is a railway.
oh, wait a minute. Here's a sign down there, leading us over the road.
Come on, what size is she? Yeah, guess what did I say it was?
14?
Yep.
14.
14 Model 19 can.
So is that the original size that was here? No, the one that was...
Yeah, look, they sabotaged it. There's a picture of it all blown up. And they brought back another one.
in the same size and everything.
Yeah.
That's absolutely awesome.
Fantastic. They only fired 80 shots out of 200. And demolition charges refused to go off. So the sergeant, oh look, it's inclined, look, to give it more elevation. That's clever, isn't it? At 12 degrees. The sergeant hit on the idea of putting the demolition charges in a shell case, putting it in the gun and firing it. And that blew the whole breech apart.
Oh, that's what happened.
Clever guy.
So what about the roof? When did that blow, or just... It doesn't say anything about that?
No, it doesn't say anything about the roof. Well, the roof probably blew off at the same time, I think. But, and then the Germans came along and used their casemate. This is a beauty.
Yeah.
This is from the naval base at Lorient, as the guy reminded me. There are the original holding down boats for the original one. And they've just plonked this in the middle of those boats. So if we brought a big crane in here...
Yep.
Oh, naughty thoughts, Roger. This would fit nicely in my hangar.
It would, wouldn't it?
It really would.
Oh.
And guess what? I'd have it reactivated to fire blanks.
I mean, it doesn't take much. You just need the screw-in breech that I still can't remember what it's called.
The well-in breech.
So this is the mount here is a little bit smaller than the original one.
No, this is the original kind of mount. It's taken off a...
No, with the base mount. The base plate is
Oh, yeah,
must
the
be
base plate
smaller.
is slightly smaller, yeah. These were, you see, when the British Navy decided that it would, rule the seas and free up the French who needed to fight on land, they put all their cruisers and some of their older pre-dreadnoughts in dock and disarmed them. And they brought all the guns, as many as they could transport, behind the front lines. And they put them on everything from fixed mountings to rail guns and everything, because they had to, because Krupp had produced so many guns for the Germans. And the French had missed out. They'd concentrated on the rapid fire 75, which was great in open warfare, but then as soon as everybody dug trenches, what everything were needed was big mortars and howitzers. The Germans had a couple of thousand, and the French had 120 howitzers. So they rushed to their factories like Saint-Chamond, and who were building howitzers for foreign customers, South American, Chinese, you name it, Siamese, and they said stop. And they grabbed everything that was in the factories, whether it was standard French ammunition sizes or not. They just took it. And then at the same time, as I say, they were disarming all their older ships. But this is a very nice gun. The 140 is a very long-range gun. They did have some on wheeled mountings as well, these 140s, which they took off cruisers and the like. The French guns were good guns, but they didn't have long barrels and they didn't have the range to match the Krupp guns, the 17 centimeter, the 19 centimeter, and so these naval guns gave them an equal shot at it. Brilliant gun, the 140. Oh boy, oh that is wonderful. I want it.
I wonder when they put it here.
It wasn't that long ago. How the hell did you get it through the forest?
Something with big wheels, and definitely something bigger than what couldn't pull me out of the fucking swamp in Czechia.
Yes. Oh, you bit on the forehead. What a beauty! Look at those recoil springs. Holy shit! That's the return to position.
Yeah,
isn't it? No hydraulic cylinders, just fucking great springs. Oh, you can't beat that.
Well, actually, yeah, you can.
Well, you can.
You really did, and we really don't see them anymore.
Oh.
Eventually, they kind of came up with, I don't know, anything else. But
they had hydro-pneumatic, hydro whatever.
But yeah, this is.
By the time they built this, but this is a beauty. And I think is that the gun shield that's been cut away at the front?
I
It was on board the ship. I don't know. Looks like that plate's been cut away, doesn't it? Yeah. It's a naval mounting.
I mean, I will say, if it has been cut away, it's been cut away extremely symmetrical.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking this would have been the inner shield, and the outer casemate or whatever this gun was placed in, would have been mounted outside this or.
Well, this is off a cruiser.
Yeah. So this would probably have been sitting in a back open casemate.
Oh, look! No! Look, they've welded it in place so that no idiot comes along and tries to move it, to pivot it, right? Now look, it's got 3 alternative pivot positions. That is extremely interesting. I've never seen that on a naval gun. Can you see? Look, that is extremely interesting. For 3 different kinds of gun.
Yeah.
It's a standard mounting, isn't it? Wow.
Probably, yeah. That's actually interesting. If they made standard mountings that were made to mount different type of cannons, that would be interesting.
Yes. And this is the front of the gun shield, and that is the slot it would.
Really?
Yeah.
I would have thought the gun shield would be a little bit further forward, in an external casemate.
No, this would be a deck gun, probably.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it! I want one.
And they snuck it in your neighborhood without you looking.
Dutch neighbour with his forklift truck would have a good go at getting that out. What a beauty! I mean, that is a good gun. What, 140 is what? It's about a 5.2 inch.
Yeah, for land targets, that's a very good gun.
Yeah, it's a very good long range gun. That.
So I wonder if the ammunition tunnels are near here. So there would be ammunition tunnel, bunker, ammunition bunker or something at the back. And there's an enormous crater over here. I want to go back and look at the bunker. I just want to see this thing because this is so deep it might even be... Whoa. It might be part of it.
Oh.
This is very large. Is this... I was thinking this is so big it looks like an entrance. It might... It might have been. Because there's holes in this. It might hit a tunnel. I don't know. I can't really figure this one out.
There's another big hole there.
There's holes in this.
Oh, yeah.
In the walls.
Yes, there are, aren't there?
It looks like a crater.
Yeah.
But it also looks like it could have been an overgrown entrance. These look like small. I mean, they fought over this area, and the Germans took it.
Yeah.
So they would have shelled it first.
No, the French sabotaged it to avoid being cut off by the Germans.
The Germans must have shelled the area first.
Well, they were moving to surround the area.
I think I found the ammunition entrance. Whatever I found a hole in the ground with cement walls. And something spiky protecting it, but that's annoying. What do you think of that?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Right.
Well, that's yeah, you don't slide all the way in. We haven't got a rope to pull you up.
Yes, actually we do. It's in the back of the car.
Oh, you have?
Yes, of course.
I
got a rappelling rope. I'll throw you up the key. Oh, this is wet and muddy. Oh, you know what? On the other side is another entrance. Right on the other side of this mount.
Okay. Ah, look. This is collapsed in here. That was a rail line or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? From that entrance here, this didn't exist. This is bits of the roof blown off that went straight in that back door to load the gun.
So, over there, oh yeah, you know what? And oh, wait a minute, there's more. Here's a ventilation shaft.
Yeah.
That is, so this whole thing I'm standing on is bunker.
Yes. There's more concrete there. You can't see behind the tree.
Yeah.
There's a lot of concrete there. Yeah.
And there's another ventilation shaft.
Well, they did say casemates. So it's not just the gun, it's, ammunition.
So where you're standing on the collapsed part is an entrance into the one that's underneath here. And also an entrance towards me.
Ah, right.
Towards this room.
Okay. Yeah, there's concrete all over the place.
Yeah. Yeah, this is one whole bunker there, so I'll see if I can get in. I saw daylight here. Yeah, here you go. We can go in here. It's just amazing what you find in the forests out here, all the way back from World War I. You find this old French position and occupied by the Germans. Alright, it's going to be a little bounce. Bounce. Alright, I'm glad I got that on camera. Yeah, alright, fine. Well, never mind. Remember when I said I'll come back for my boots? Yeah, never mind. Alright, so besides the slippery entrance here, there's a big square room with metal cross beams with hooks in them. with hooks in them. It could have been barracks. There's also vertical wood beams that I've never seen before. And yeah, this would have continued into the other collapsed part of the. Yeah. Yeah, it has rusty hooks. I don't know if this was for the crew to sleep here. This looks like for hammocks. That makes sense. Yeah, I think this was the compartment for the crew. I mean, it's pretty dry. It's just too bad it's collapsed on the other side. If it wasn't, that is definitely something that could be dug out and walked into the other bunker.
And they could replace it with a concrete roof, couldn't they?
I mean, the roof in here is perfect.
Yeah, what with the gun line?
Oh yeah, because the roof in here is in really, really good shape. Yeah, this is in very, very good shape in here. It's just oh, I'm stepping on a frog. I'm sorry. All right, frog, can we agree that you stay and I go? Some mud kiss.
You could get up here again.
Now that I know what I'm into, it was just the mud was.
You all right?
Oh yeah.
Okay?
I just sat my ass down on wet mud.
Oh.
It's not like it's.
Well, I appreciate you going in.
So they literally built the crew compartments surrounding the bunker underground here. I keep thinking that there would be another entrance, but.
Well, there's been one for concrete here.
I was thinking, yeah.
Blown off the roof. Is there something? Oh, there's another ventilation shaft.
Yeah. That's why this whole thing is there's the bunkers underneath this whole embankment.
That is really cool.
And that is something that could be dug out.
Yes, it could.
Absolutely, because it's just wet mud.
Wow, after they've gone to all the effort of putting the cannon back in, you'd think they'd go back a little bit further.
Yeah, clean it up, let people go in, because that's not unsafe at all. And the roof was in perfect shape.
Oh.
Just straighten it out, make it a little staircase down. Yeah. Put up a sign that don't be a dumbass. Yeah. And people will be fine.
They dug down like that and they covered them with big thick tree branches. That's all they did. As protection, not concrete bunkers in other words.
Yeah, because like I said, nature doesn't dig square holes. Just very rarely.
There's something over there, isn't there? There.
Ah. Yes, there is. It looks like an entrance to something. Actually, there's two. This one looks like a bit of disrepair. Oh! Here's part of collapsed tunnel. I see corrugated iron right here.
Oh, you know what this is? This is a gun pit.
It is. Yeah, and this would be the observation that sort of collapsed over time.
Yeah.
And the trench running behind it.
Yeah.
And then the gun, and then another gun pit.
Another gun pit.
Yeah.
Oh.
Now, isn't it interesting that these gun pits are pointing the opposite direction of the cannon?
Yes.
Yeah.
They're for what, 15 centimeter? Oh, yeah, 17s are too big.
So even if the Germans took the cannon, they couldn't use it because it was pointing in the wrong direction.
Exactly.
I mean, they would.
But they'd have pulled it out and stuck it in one of these.
Yeah, I guess they would.
Yes. Mm.
Yeah, this is a nicely dug
It is, isn't it?
gun pit. Yeah.
That is nice. Yeah. That'd have been wood revetment all the way around, which is rotted away.
And then somewhere up this way, there would have been probably a couple of communication trenches and some forward observation.
There's another.
Yeah.
That could be a machine gun nest.
it will be right over the barrels. It will be
Yes,
right
it
over
would,
the
wouldn't
50.
it?
So
That's true. They'd have to be told when to get out of the way.
time. What?
This is another one. This is another
It is.
gun pit.
Yeah.
Filled in with mud, etc. But that's a gun pit.
Yeah.
Bloody hell!
So somewhere in that direction would be forward observation. There would be probably perimeter security, a little pit somewhere smaller, a trench running that way that would have been gone. But these are not the bunkers we're looking for.
Yes, they are casemates. They say.
Oh, these are the casemates.
These are the casemates.
So where is the observation tree?
Ah.
Yes, you heard me correctly. I said observation tree. One of the interesting aspects, I think, about World War I is that the French were not really prepared when it came to artillery and heavy cannons. Because one of the main problems the French had during the Franco-Prussian War was that their cannons just could not keep up with the modern German Krupp cannons. The French had the better rifle during that war, but they kind of missed the point. In the post-action reports, the French military seemed to have misunderstood the situation, whereas they blamed the rifles for not having been better, which meant that for World War I the French had great rifles, but they really hadn't learned the lessons of effective cannon warfare, like the Prussians and the Germans had figured out years before.
All right.
Right, here we have a Debange cannon, caliber 155L for long. Now this is one of the older generation of cannons which were started in 1877, and they were brought in an emergency to replace the many 75s, the Soissons cannons, which had either been destroyed by the Germans, left behind, had worn out their barrels, or had literally exploded using poor quality commercially produced ammunition. So the French army had to rush back to the fortresses and pull off the ramparts the old 120mm and 155mm Debange guns of an earlier generation. And they worked marvelously well behind the trenches. The big problem was that they left their recoil mechanism behind on the ramparts, which is a hydraulic.
It used to roll
tube.
backwards and upwards.
It rolled backwards and then it would be pushed back into its original firing position. Okay, because there was a big post sticking up out of a platform that the gun recoiled on and then was pushed back, ready to be loaded again. So when you pulled it off the rampart, you didn't take this gigantic platform with you, you just placed it in a gun battery. So when it fired, it would run backward, and then you would have to push it forward into its original position to reload it again. So one of the ways they tried to reduce the recoil was fitting these caterpillar tracks. They were invented by an Italian, and they were named cingoli in Italian, these little shoes, if you like. And it's like caterpillar tracks. They slow down the recoil.
So when it rolled all the way back, you'd also lose any kind of sighting.
Yes, you'd have to roll it forward and resight it again. But then it took so long to reload the cannon, the old-fashioned. It's not a quick loader. That, you know, just repointing it was a
Good enough.
a minor inconvenience. It has a slide at the back, again to slow down the trail is mounted on a slide, which would roll along the ground and slow it down. Right, it's not a quick loader. It won't. Right, you have a tubular breech block which fits in this ring. So to load it, you obviously push the shell in, then you close the ring, and then you screw the breech plug into the interrupted threads.
Oh yes.
Okay?
Yes.
So then when it's fired, there's no shell because it's loaded with a bag of powder.
Oh, so this is a two-stage ammunition.
Yeah.
Shell
two
first,
stage.
then
Yeah,
powder bag.
which is still the caliber and the system used by the American Army and the French Army today. Okay?
Yeah.
So to unload it, you have to undo the breech plug, pull it back out, and then swing the ring back out. Then you can push the shell in and the powder bag behind it. So it's not quick loading by any means, but it's a very effective gun. Now this one has suffered damage in two places, but I suspect from the same shell, because it was discovered several years ago buried, completely buried under the ground. It had to be dug up and restored and derusted as much as possible and painted, etc., which it now needs all over again. But it was buried for about 70, 80 years. And the reason it was buried is a bit of a mystery, because if you look at the gun, the muzzle, it's obviously been hit by a German shell, which has come whizzing down, smashed the muzzle, rebounded, and broken open the front plate. It's probably exploded here and destroyed the front plate. There will be a flat plate across there.
Yeah.
Okay? So I suspect that the gun was out of commission and was therefore, what should we say? Well, one theory is it was buried by the French to stop the Germans from capturing it. But since it's been knocked out of action, why would they bother to dig a big hole enough to bury this monster?
Yeah.
I suspect that it was in a gun battery that was sunk slightly down into the ground with magazines on either side, and German shell fire actually buried it by throwing earth in the air and just dumping it on top of the beast.
Do we know how many of these they pulled out and put into service?
There is a second one of these buried not far away from where they found the first one, but before the man who found it could reveal the secret, he actually died. So somewhere near this village there is a 155 de Bones like this one, still lying underground undiscovered.
Do we know how many were in use during the war?
How many of these were used? Ooh, about 1,500. There were masses of them.
So when they ran out of 75mm shells,
they brought
and
these
barrels,
out off the
they brought these out, but they have to then
ramparts.
retool the factories to make more munition for them.
No, they had thousands of rounds in the fortresses already, and then they started making, remaking the. It was a standard caliber used by French warships anyway.
Oh, okay.
And a standard caliber used by Schneider and Le Creusot cannons that
So
they were
literally
selling
when
abroad.
So when the Germans captured French munitions, or vice versa, they could actually use.
They could actually use some of them, yeah. But when the barrels started to wear out after hundreds of rounds, they actually made new barrels. And the way you can tell the new barrel from the old one is that the dolphin, the bracket you lift it by, is actually crosswise on the new cannons. I don't know why. They found it easier to manufacture them that way. Now, there's an interesting feature here. When you are towing this beast, it's muzzle heavy because it's so long.
Yes.
So what you do is you undo the cannon from the trunnions there. I don't know how they do this. I wouldn't like to do it. And you lift the whole cannon backwards and you put it in the traveling trunnions.
Oh, that's what they are.
And you lock it down there. And then it's much further back. It's more stable to tow it across.
So do you not take these off as well?
Yeah, you'd have to. Well, you could tow it on the chinglies. You're going to wear them out, so I would recommend taking them off. They simply unbolt, don't they?
Yeah.
You could unbolt those, and then you could run it on roads behind horses or tow it behind trucks. And they had some four-wheel drive artillery tractors as well in World War One. But that is so cool that you can actually rebalance the beast.
It's just
to tow her along.
That barrel must weigh tons.
Yeah, yeah.
You would have to have. I mean, under fire, quick retreat. It's understandable why they would leave. Why guns would be abandoned.
Yeah, and they take the breech block out of it, and the Germans couldn't use it.
And half of them will probably be towed by horses anyway.
Yes, yes.
But to hook them up and change them and flip the barrel for you to be able to tow them out.
Yeah.
And when there were quick advances, that just would not happen.
It's not like an anti-tank shoot and scoot.
No.
You've got to plan this well in advance.
What are the range on this? 10, 15 kilometers?
Ooh, yes, and the rest. If you actually dug a pit, you could, when you got her up, that's maximum elevation. You dug a pit behind the trail, and you could angle it up even further. And then these guns would take a heavy supercharge over their original powder bag. They were brilliant guns, brilliant for what, you know, they did the job. 1877, it's not bad.
So here again we have pre-World War I technology in use for World War I.
Yeah.
With the caliber that is still in use today.
And the same loading system.
So you really cannot talk about the evolution of warfare unless you incorporate the War of 1870. At least.
That's when everything started. In America, of course, that's when you know, the Winchester comes in, the Gatling comes in, breech loading cannons come in the American Civil War.
Was this
in a small way?
Was it the American Civil War that started spurring on this development? I mean, I'm sure it's not like the Europeans have not had a.
I don't think so. Mind you, there were a lot of American arms brought in for the 1870-71 war. Winchesters were used, Colts were brought in. Because they were slightly more in advance than the contemporary French weaponry.
Oh, they just had a
But no, they had brilliant gunsmiths. They had brilliant designers.
Yeah.
They had brilliant steel workers. They could make cannons and machine guns which were the best in the world, no question. And the aircraft they built, incredible. The Spads.
Yeah.
Like that, the Breguet bombers. They're second to none. You can't argue with that. So there we are. I thought you'd be interested.
Yeah,
in
that's
this.
that's really something.
It is.
Now we just have to find a nice indoor home for it.
Yes, it'll just fit in my hangar, I think, if I just.
There's a crack here.
Yeah, there's a crack there, isn't there? I wonder if the shell burst.
Traveled under.
Traveled under and exploded there and blew that up in the air. Yeah, it's possible. In which case, well, you see, I don't know if they could change the barrel. That would still be fireable. I think they could bolt a plate across the front or rivet another plate on, and she's going to work again.
Yeah, this would time a rivet, not welding.
Yeah, it's riveting. Look at the size of those rivets. They're immense. And you've got big holding down lugs to handle a monster like this. Very fit. Now, they did fit some of them onto later mountings with recoil control cylinders as well. But then they thought that's a bit of a waste of time because you could just build a big modern gun or a 17 centimeter or something bigger on the same mounting.
During the First World War, miners from both sides were exclusively hired to dig mines under the enemy lines, placing huge amounts of explosives and detonating them onto the trenches opposing them. They were using 10, 20, 30,000 pounds of explosives, sometimes more, sometimes less. And sometimes shallower tunnels were dug to deceive the other side, tricking them to detonate their counter mines in order to collapse what they perceived to be the main tunnel assault. Yet, by doing this, they were disguising the real, deeper tunnels that were being dug, containing huge amounts of explosives. And this was not just on the Somme that these tactics were used. Here in Verdun, both sides were busy digging lots and lots of these tunnels too. These huge explosions were the largest man-made explosives before the nuclear age, and over 500 of these mines were detonated throughout the war. But just imagine those miners digging the shallow decoy tunnels, those designed specifically to lure the opposing side to detonate their mines, collapsing the very ones you are currently digging. It makes one wonder how they made people do it. Some would say dedication to duty, certainly above and beyond. But the stress became so bad on both sides that they moved towards an agreement whereby they would only blow each other up in the early evenings. Despite such an agreement, it is reckoned that over 8,000 men who fought and died in the trenches were never found again. On May 14, 1916, the Germans detonated 60,000 kilos of explosives under the western end of the ridge. This enormous blast ripped out an entire section of the hill and killed only, I say, 108 French soldiers, and stunned, injured many more. From the middle of 1917, the French started detonating smaller but deeper mines. These were designed to destroy the German tunnels, but not rip up the landscape any further. During the struggle for domination of the hill, the French detonated 320 mines and the Germans 199. Neither side really, actually, made much gain from any of this.
So this is all trenches intermingled with explosion. So this was the trench coming down here. And everywhere the forest is just littered with these enormous craters.
Yeah.
Where the French on one side and the Germans on the other side would tunnel in under each other, fill them with explosives and blow each other up. For 18 months, not just for a day. It wasn't just a setup for one assault, it was continuous.
Oh, no. Continuous. Tens of thousands of guys got wiped out here.
Forest we drove through up here, you literally had trenches. On one side there was Germans leading throughout everywhere, crisscrossing the forest. French trenches on the other side.
Yes.
And there was just mayhem and battle and... I mean, the whole hill has been demolished.
Torn apart. There's a big crater here.
Bloody hell.
Look at the size of that.
Imagine the explosion of that.
It's hard to even...
It's difficult to photograph because you don't get the idea of the slope of the depth, do you?
It's very hard to see how deep this is.
Yeah.
We're back to the old antics. How many gallons of milk will this hold? I mean, a bus would look small here.
Oh, the coach with 50 kids would fall in there. Yeah, never be seen again.
What's cement piece? Well,
there are block houses all over the place. Yeah.
Oh, so there are blockhouses here too?
Yeah. They built blockhouses everywhere.
They did?
They used everything from gates, farm gates, to bedding, to everything, and they poured concrete over it at night and hoped that it would be fixed in the morning before the French gunners opened up on them. Montfaucon, the Butte de Montfaucon, has 17 German bunkers all around it, built from the ruins of the village. Now, let's go to this table and you see why they killed each other for so long.
Yeah. So this is the outcropping. Is that cement sitting down there? Or is that the rest of the blockhouse down there?
Yeah.
I see metal sticking up. So this was a ridge. I mean, this is absolutely insanely gorgeous up here.
Yes, it is. You think how many thousands of men were blown to pieces, just, you know. And if you're French, you've pushed the Germans off this ridge, and that is the plain of the Wavre. You can see every German truck moving along here, every German cannon being displaced, and you can call up your artillery and shell it to hell. The Germans had to fight tooth and nail to stop the French getting to this point. Oh, they'd have lost the whole of the plain. They couldn't move a muscle.
You can see everything.
You could see everything, yeah.
So did the French ever succeed in taking the hill?
No, they didn't succeed in taking it. They lost thousands of men, the Germans lost thousands trying to defend it, and it was status quo at the end. It was
German commander or a French commander who would have taken this would have had a map like this where he could pinpoint, mark down every avenue, every road. For the Germans to take this, it had a strategic, there was a tactical point of view. For the French to fight this hard to keep it, less so.
well,
Moral or historical.
They weren't going to let the Germans get away with it. They weren't going to let the Germans walk in here and take over parts of their beautiful countryside where they grew wine and they made cheese, etc. And the Germans came in and trampled on it and said, now this is Germany. And the French said, no, we're not having that.
And the interesting thing about World War I in the West was this was never supposed to have been a long war. The German General Staff said the Battle of France we'll be in Paris in 6 weeks, the French will surrender, and we can turn our forces around against the Russians. This was never meant to have been a 5-6 year war of destruction.
Yes, I would not want to be sightseeing here in 1916, 17. So it is a long way down. So that's what remains of the blockhouse on top here.
Thousands of tons of concrete.
And that's interesting to think, because again, we think of World War I and we led to believe this was all dug trenches, men with shovels in mud, but they actually built fortifications during the battle and the fighting.
Yeah.
It's just nice when somebody had planted a tree in the middle of it or decided to plant itself there.
Oh, I don't know. I think it founded itself there. Because you would have put it in the center, wouldn't you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it did itself there, but it really is something that is very hard to describe. And I have no idea if pictures will do these craters justice, because
Well, for my European Commission talk,
I mean, no, this is the only way to really show a crater like this, I'm guessing, would be with something in the center to show how big it is.
yes. It is another monster.
Wow.
The records only tell of how many men died attacking the place, and you know how long the battles took and the regiments that were involved. That's all the French are interested in. They don't give you the nitty-gritty details like how many tons of explosive, you know.
And how do you? I mean, this is a mass grave of German soldiers.
Yeah, yes. They were blown in the air and then fell back down with the debris.
Yeah. Not to mention that it made this crater and kicked up all this dirt to the side, and everything and everybody who was anywhere near here would have been. Yeah.
That's an awful lot of tons of earth.
Yeah.
And it was much deeper originally, because
Of course,
half
it's
of it fell back in, and then the leaves and the foliage has been falling into it.
It's
over
been 100 years. Of course, things fill up.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is
It's
amazing.
a big baby, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. And you could have had a lot of. This is what is it, a football field?
And in 1,000 years' time, people will come here and say, "What on earth was this all about?"
I mean, this is why things like this needs to be remembered, because.
Yeah.
And regardless for what or how or whom, this is World War I. They fought for their country, because they did what soldiers always do. They show up when they're ordered to do so.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
a lot of them didn't expect to. Well, I guess everybody always expected to be home for Christmas. Famous last words.
Yes, the French wanted to march down the Unterdellen, drink the beer, and the Germans wanted to lounge around on the Champs-Élysées drinking champagne. And if only they'd done that, that's the stupidest thing of all. They'd all have left their rifles at home and gone off on a grand tour and drunk beer and champagne.
It was like all other world wars. It is something a few people want,
Yes.
where a lot of people get to pay for their.
Yes, and a lot of people get very rich by
Oh,
building the machines that kill the thousands of people who get blown up.
And since the French have decided to leave pretty much a gun on every street corner, let's have a look and talk about the most famous one of the World War I pieces.
The standard 75's on a fortress mount.
So this is the standard 75 that they eventually ran out of.
Well, not quite ran out of, but they just didn't have enough. I mean, they started off with between 5,000 and 6,000 of them. And they were going to win World War I with this gun. And if the war had remained a war of movement, they might have done it, because it could fire faster and further than the German 77, which was the nearest equivalent, and the British 13 and 18 pounders, which were a very much different design. But this, you can work up to 20 rounds a minute if you have to. But they recoil an awfully long way, and they eject automatically. So as the gun is going forward, the loader receives the next shelf. And as the gun is going forward, the breech is open to eject the empty case. As it goes forward, he throws the next shell in and shuts the breech. And the firer, sitting with his back to the enemy in a seat on the other side, all he does is pulls the cord attached to the firing device. And she goes off, she recoils back to about there. The breech opens, ejects the empty case, and as it runs forward again, you throw the next shell in. You don't mess about, you throw it in. And you slam this shut, and he pulls the cord. So you've got 3 seconds to do all that. And what eventually happens is you get tired, and the gun gets hot, and that slows down the rate at which it goes back forward. So eventually the rate of fire will fall to about 14 rounds a minute. But you can start her off at 20. And if someone is firing 20 of these 75mm shells at me, I'm going to run, I'm going to leg it. There is no argument.
So what about sighting?
Sighting, there would have been a sight on the mount there.
Yeah.
They're always removed. You always lose
Yeah,
the
of
sights
course.
at the very
But
first
nothing fancy, just a rudimentary, this general direction sight.
thing. No, it's just sort of like a periscopic. It's
Okay, so
quite a
the
good sight.
little brass.
Yeah, brass
scope sight,
sights.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing the barrel, is that screwed in or is that just...
Well, that's where the recoil mechanism will connect onto it. So there's a piece missing.
Yeah.
There is actually a sleeve which goes over it. So it's a great shame they don't have a complete. They're not complete. They've taken the recoil mechanisms out, and I have no idea why. But that is going. Those recoil slabs, control slabs, are going to go all the way in here to about there. So you can see the length is going to recoil.
Yeah.
Or about there, I suppose. It's considerable. The secret weapon that would win World War I. Now what number is this? 1903, number 4. Wow. Aha.
I wonder how different this is from the one in the 75 in World War II.
Exactly the same gun.
It isn't it?
Yeah.
And this was built in 1901, so we're looking at, again, what was essentially World War II technology in World War I.
Oh, look. The barrel was made in 1915.
Ah.
It's a replacement barrel. And the shell, of course, turns into the shell used in the Sherman. Same shell case. Different loadings. And armor piercing as well.
Yeah.
Not very armor piercing.
So this is basically what the shell from a Sherman, which was not a bad shell. It would do its job. It wasn't as bad as we have been maybe told, depending who you're talking to. Yeah, here we have Poudre 1901, number 152.
Ah, so it's a mixture of parts. Ah yes, it's a Puteaux Arsenal. It's the model 1897 APX.
Do you think it's a coincidence that when you actually look down the barrel of this, it's pointing straight at the German flag?
Ah!
No, it's not. That's a Belgian flag.
All right. Well, I will tell you one coincidence. When we had the centennial celebrations in 2016, we had a lot of reenactors come through the town. We had the German Uhlans on their black horses ride through the streets of Verdun where they never made it 100 years earlier, and we watched them with amazement. And then on the Victory Monument, the steps leading up, you had all the Allies up one side and all the Axis, well not Axis, the Central Powers on the other side. And they weren't necessarily German, they were, you know, they came from all over Europe, they were Greeks, but they were dressed up as Germans and Austro-Hungarian sailors. And we all sang the Marseillaise, the assembled crowd, and all the reenactors. And then we started on the German national anthem. And the moment the music started up, 3 or 4 dogs in the audience started to bark, which was amazing. They were silent through the Marseillaise and they barked at the German national hymn.
And next week from the battlefields of Verdun, we're going to look at some of the smaller forts and see how the soldiers lived inside them, and of course how some of the lessons learned from the Franco-Prussian War had now become an effect in the steel domes. There's so much to see here, and I just can't wait to show you. And we're also going to talk a little bit about bathrooms.
So this is general effect.
Behind me is Vantage von Braun's first test stand. Down the road is Dietmar's nuclear reactor. Over there is the Maginot Line and all its amazing forts. I'm visiting them all and I'm bringing them to you. So I really appreciate you like, follow, and share what I'm doing, trying to document all these important historical locations. And if you feel like you want to watch more pictures or documents that I use for these, go to lostbattlefields.com. And if you feel like helping me out with my travels, because gasoline and travel and airfare is expensive, my PayPal is there, protectionserviceint.com. You are more than welcome, but you don't have to. I appreciate all your support and all your help, and I love seeing these locations, and I love bringing them to you.